not been doing this. All right, this is author James Rosone. I am being joined today by one of my good author friends, Ryan Scow, who has agreed to take some of the reader questions and read them to me, and I answer them back rather than me trying to have a two-way conversation with myself. It's called Crazy Town, and while I feel like I have been in Crazy Town, I should not create a video to further exemplify that. So this Q&A is probably a long time coming. I should have been doing more of these, I realize, but I'm trying to catch up on doing them now. So what we're going to focus on is looking at the Monroe Doctrine series. We are approaching the release of volume 6, thank God. I have a reprieve coming up. So we're going to talk about that and the series writ large and kind of what's been going on. The series now has been, we released the first book in January of 2021. So we are now, what does that make us? 19 or 20 months into the series release. So it's been going for a little while. We have 5 books out. We are, I don't know, I think we're approaching 13,500 reviews or something across the series. So it's doing pretty damn good. We have sold, probably over 150, 200,000 copies worldwide on the series. So it's been doing really good. And we still have several more books to go. But it's time to do a Q&A and talk about some of these specific points. And for those of you who don't know, when you buy the audiobooks, at the end of the audiobooks is actually a recorded Q&A at the end of the audiobooks. That's about 15 to 20 minutes long. So there's, kind of a little nugget of information, and we talk very specifically about that book, what transpired, what we were doing and thinking, and then where the next book's going. So if you haven't checked those out, they're also worth listening to. So no further ado, I'll hand it over to Ryan here, and we will get started with answering some of these questions here.
All righty. So the first question comes from Bob Alvarez. It says, since perhaps World War I, how the U.S. fights its ground wars from the early days of the conflict to the end evolves in weapons and tactics. Can you explain how that's been, if at all, detailed within the Monroe Doctrine?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because I think as authors, thriller authors or techno thriller authors who want to write about wars and conflicts and things like that, you need to be both a student of history to understand where we have come and where we are, to understand where we are going. And to that effect, I've always been a history buff, love studying different world wars, conflicts, not just American, but writ large globally, because there are patterns, I think, you can look back in history and just see the different patterns of how X led to Y, led to Z, and so on and so on. And so I look at a lot of that and see how things are evolving and changing, specifically with warfare. And when we look at armed conflicts, the biggest technological changes we saw, like say in Civil War, a huge change was actually the air balloon. When the first hot air balloons would go up, they had strung together signal cords, and they could actually do spotting for artillery and troop movements. And that was kind of a game changer because you didn't have a way of having very good reconnaissance with communication. Cavalry was great, but you'd still have to send a runner back, go find the brigade or division headquarters and report the intel. Well, now you have a balloon that's using a telegraph that's sending it right to the headquarters. That's a game changer. And then again, in World War I, we saw another evolution where you had the airplane and you're able to take pictures over the battlefield. And, that was a big piece there, because then they could look at it and say, okay, well, this artillery clearly did not soften this position up the way we want. So where are they going to pound it for another week and see if that changes it, or maybe come up with another plan, or just say, well, screw it. We were going to send, 20,000 troops against this fixed position. I guess we're going to have to make it like 200 now, 200,000, just more casualties. But that was, it's neat to see the evolutions in technology. So one of the big ones we're seeing right now is the information warfare and how that's being leveraged in the Monroe Doctrine. That was a huge one we saw, where we saw in book 1, you'll notice the evolution of Jade Dragon, and what JD was essentially doing was becoming a vacuum cleaner, sucking up information. And they had partnered with Facebook, Meta, and Google, and some of the other places like that to create these very clever social media I don't want to say games, but what character are you in this TV series, Game of Thrones? What character would you be in Game of Thrones? Answer this little short profile quiz thing, and it'll spit out and say, hey, you're this person. And my God, everyone's a bunch of gullible idiots filling this crap out. And what's it doing? It's building a social profile of you. But, like good Americans who don't pay attention to details, inside the terms, when you sign up and agree to this thing, you're granting them access to your entire social media profiles, your contacts, who you like, who you follow, all this crap. And sometimes when you're clicking on things, it's also embedding spyware into, or script loggers and different things like that onto your profiles on your computers. And through that kind of capability, that's how Cambridge Analytica was able to develop its amazing epic software that was used in the 2015, 2016 election cycle. That's what allowed the Trump campaign to say, okay, in this city block, these people are going to be receptive to this issue, and 5 blocks away, they're going to be receptive to this issue. And they would develop a micro-targeted ad at that to address that issue to that specific cluster of houses or constituency. And that's how you shape opinion. That's how you shape, perceptions. Well, this works for political campaigns. It also works for marketing. So when I'm walking down the street and I'm approaching a Starbucks, Starbucks can beam a discount code to my phone as I'm approaching and go, wow, look at that. I can get $1 off of this, $1 off my Starbucks drink. And wouldn't you know it, there's a freaking Starbucks, I'm approaching one right now. So all this cool technology, it's silly to think it's not going to get used in warfare. And so we looked at, the other piece of this question here is on the introduction of what new technologies and tactics. So we had the digital information warfare. Well, then we transitioned from that to how AI is going to do what I call, or what has been coined called predictive behavioral analysis, where you have a naval commander in charge of a all-you-burk destroyer going through the South China Sea. And the Chinese have declared this their economic exclusion zone. Americans not allowed to travel through here. He says Chinese waters. Yeah, right. So we go through. The Chinese don't know how far they can push us, what our rules of engagement are, and how much they can get away with. But if they know who the commander is for that ship, and they have social profiles on most of the crew and the decision chain above them, you can start to build it's like a wargaming predictive analysis of how they will respond if nudged this way, if nudged that way. And so what that does is it allows a Chinese commander to move and do certain things he otherwise would not do, because he knows the American's not going to fire. He's not going to shoot his ship, shoot at them if he does X, Y, or Z. Now, if he does something else, they will get shot at. So they don't do that. What they're doing is they're pushing you, pushing you, pushing you. And then we naturally respond, and we develop a new set of protocols for how to handle this. And what do? We adjust our posture. We say, okay, well, all right, let's give them a little more room. So we edge out a little further out because we don't want conflict. And as the AI sees that happening, it starts to say, okay, this is working. Let's continue this tactic of nudge, nudge, nudge. And lo and behold, we're not sailing to the South China Sea. That wouldn't have been possible if they didn't know how that commander is going to respond to different things based on social behaviors and profiles and things that they've built over time. And so I think that's a big part of warfare, because when a battle is going to shape up and start to happen, how will the commander for this division react if X, Y happens? Maybe he won't do, maybe he'll fall back, maybe he'll do this, maybe he'll do that. And when you can start to predict those behaviors, you can start to influence decisions on the battlefield. And I think that's a really big piece that we're going to see in future warfare.
Perfect.
Do you have any other questions on the follow-up on inside that question there before we kind of move on to another one?
No, that's pretty clear. That's a good explanation. Well, it's good too, because you get perspective from you with your experiences as well. So, of course, that's one of the things that makes the series great. You ready for the next question?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Comes from Mark Canty. It says, with some of the recent weapon systems and doctrines changes that have occurred since the series started, the Quick Sync project, longer range Hellfire R models, the pivot and reorganization of the USMC, and so on, has it been having an effect or influence on how you're depicting the conflict and forces compared to your original notes?
Unfortunately, yes, in some respects, and no in others. I've always kind of thought of myself as a bit of a futurist in that I tend to really look at future development and where things are going. So when I was working at U.S. European Command, I worked in the J2, which is the Joint Intelligence Directorate. And our section was the engagement and strategies section. So part of it was, foreign engagements and working with our allied and partner nations and doing different projects and programs to work by, with, and through them, as SOCOM used to say, because my position was a SOCOM appointed position. And so we also had the other piece of it was the strategic section. So we had 3 guys in our particular group there who worked in a function called Deep Futures. And what Deep Futures was really responsible for looking at is saying, where do we see things in the 15 to 25 year outlook, whether it's technologies, different strategies and weapon systems and platforms, how they're going to be involved and used in political changes in governments and how that affects things. And so a couple of the guys who work there, they're all PhD eggheads. I really had a good time talking with them about wargaming, different strategies and technologies out. One of the big things we were looking at the time was actually was how the dark web, through Tor browsers and use an onion, going inside there and being able to see inside what's going on, and how Bitcoin at the time was being used for a lot of illicit trafficking of banned weapon technology for the Iranians and setting up their nuclear proliferation stuff. So that was the challenge for us, was how do we prevent the Iranians from buying all this crap? Because they set up a front company in country X, buy stuff that looks legit, dual use technology stuff, and the government would buy mass quantities of cryptocurrencies, move it to this wallet here, get transferred into cash. The front company now buys your stuff, ships it around. It's a big, complicated web. And clearly you can see in the Russia war with Ukraine right now how that stuff actually works, because the sanctions are not having much of an effect on the Russians' ability to acquire certain technologies, no matter what they say, because the Ukrainians are looking at cruise missiles and drones that, lo and behold, are covered in American technology and other nations' technology that are sanctioned. So obviously it's getting through somehow. And there's a very intricate layer I could go in for hours on how that crap works. But it does affect some of it because, for instance, when we originally wrote the series, we wrote this before Joe Biden became president. That did have we did have to change some aspects of it, because at the time when we were writing the series, the whole book was written before the presidency took place. And so I hadn't anticipated that the United States would have pivoted away from the energy dominance strategy that the Trump administration was moving forward on, because the Trump administration was pushing forward on this turning America into basically the gas station of democracy. And we were on a path where probably by 2022 right now, we were going to be able to supplant Russian energy by having a string of natural gas export terminals on the East Coast, the Gulf, and on the West Coast. And, a few other pipelines to move things around. That would have made a game changer, because you won't need Russian energy, because buy it from America. And West Virginia is like, the Kuwait of natural gas. So it was win-win for us, because we would have made a ton of money on steal that from taxes and jobs and everything else, and we would have crushed the Russians, because economically we just would have took away their entire petrostate. But obviously that didn't happen, so we had to kind of change a few things around. The Russian invasion happened. That forced us to do some changes around too, because up until the invasion, I still was kind of the belief that Russia is a unique opportunity where you work with adversaries on different points of mutual agreement that we can both look at, and China is one of them. the whole goal is, how do we align and contain the China for 21st century is our biggest threat. Russia has to be a part of that. They have a massive border. And unfortunately, the current strategy is actually to now make Russia and China together, which is a bad mix for the remainder of the 21st century. Does not set us up for success on that realm. And one of the other really things that caught me by surprise when we originally developed the series, because we wrote this series, the first 2 books of it were written over the summer. Where are they written? I started in the spring and then through the summer of 2020. And while it didn't come out until January of 2021, book 1 was done probably in like August or September of 2020. And we were working on book 2 before we released them because they're pretty tight. I was shocked, frankly, with how fragile the global distribution economic system was. I was unaware that the bulk of America's pharmaceutical inputs, so like the components, things like that go into making your medications, comes from China. I did not realize how fragile some of the other economic pieces were. For instance, when shipping shut down, all these shipping containers were trapped in the wrong port, because if they're all here, say they're all in the American West Coast port, right? Well, if we don't have anything to fill it up and send it back, that ship's not just going to load up a bunch of empty containers. That's costing them money, and they're losing money to do that. So they wait for the containers to get filled. Well, in the meantime, in China, they don't have any containers to load all the crap they just built that they need to get shipped to the United States. So then you had a bottleneck with freaking containers, of all things, that gummed up the system. Lots of little things like that. And then on the oil market, a lot of people look at this, they don't fully understand how the oil pieces work with refineries. It doesn't matter if America is producing or extracting, say, 20 million barrels a day. We don't have refinery capacity to do squat with that. It has to be refined into gas and diesel. And we haven't built a refinery since 1984. So we don't have the capacity to meet the current demand. So that has to get sent somewhere else, refined, then sent back to us and then used. And America's refineries that we built in the 80s, 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s were used to the really crappy oil you get from the Middle East and elsewhere. So they're geared for that crap. And they do very good. They're very efficient with it. But America's stuff from the shale and fracking that's generating all this awesome oil is good, clean oil, good stuff. Well, our refineries aren't made for that. European refineries are. And so we ship the good stuff from here to Europe, and we take the bad stuff from the Middle East and Africa here and use it. It's just a mismatch of how these things work. As I do more study for the Monroe Doctrine, I look at this and go, wow, this is a complete mess, how the whole global infrastructure is set up. So yeah, there's a lot of different pieces there. Why don't you ask a specific question inside of this one, maybe something else to kind of peel back the layer here?
Well, one of the things that was curious is the surprisingly poor performance of the Russian equipment on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about the scale and effectiveness of drones on the battlefield to some degree, but Russian equipment kind of plays into this as well. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, and honestly, this was an absolute shocker. Okay. So from the intelligence perspective, we've been told, that wasn't my set. I wasn't dealing with the Russian set or actually conventional forces set. Mine was always on the counterterrorism, the hunting foreign fighters and extremists, and then figuring out the rat lines for where the money and munitions are moving around. And a lot of that works inside of the illicit trafficking, narco-terrorism, the narcos and drugs and human trafficking. They all use the same rat lines.
Yeah.
So I wasn't my area of focus wasn't specifically on acquiring the info of foreign adversaries and militaries. There was other departments and groups that did that kind of stuff, but whoever was in charge of that and doing that really, really, really jacked things up. So I don't know my personal opinion is I think this is a bigger intelligence failure than 9/11 is or Pearl Harbor was, because we have spent decades developing weapon technologies and platforms to fight an adversary that we are now finding out never existed.
Yeah.
The Russian equipment that we have spent billions or trillions of dollars developing weapons to fight doesn't exist. And that's a problem, because now the question is the intelligence we have of the Chinese army, their military equipment, their aircraft, their ships, everything. How good is it? Like, can we trust that intelligence? Is
That's
that
relevant.
intelligence still viable? Is it real? Because I can
Yeah.
tell you, if we're not thinking this is really good stuff, and we go into battle, we find out it is, top of the line or better than ours, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Or on the other side, we're saying this is great or it's super good, but in reality, it's pure garbage. Then we're going to shy away from making decisions or standing our ground because we're afraid of this technology and how good it is, when in reality, it's just smoke and mirrors, like the Russians were.
Yeah.
That's a huge challenge and a huge problem that I think we have to figure out how we're going to handle that kind of stuff. But drones, my goodness, we've known that those were highly effective. They were really honed in Iraq and in Afghanistan. The Switchblade drones were tested in Afghanistan a couple times for the Marines, and they have been really coming into their own in this war. But I'll tell you what, man, I didn't envision the drones getting to the level they are right now in 2022. I thought it probably would have been another 3 to 5 more years, but wow.
Yeah.
I've seen videos on like Twitter from some of these Russians on Twitter, the ones that aren't banned yet or haven't gone off, that they're showing some incredible videos though. You get little quadcopters coming out there and they're carrying like, 2 or 3 hand grenades. That's insane. They're going out there just dropping hand grenades right down on top of the Ukrainian soldiers.
Yeah.
That's crazy how that kind of stuff is working. And these kill drones, the suicide drones, they're nuts. Like right now, the Iranians, go figure, okay, talk about shock and assault. They're bringing in these drones, and these are relatively cheap tools. Okay, it's a poor man's Air Force, but they're really coming into being quite effective. I didn't think that they would. I thought they were kind of garbage, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, we all thought that a lot of the Iranian stuff is just kind of crap. And people still say that, but when they're blowing up transformer after transformer in Ukraine, it's a little hard to continue to say this thing's garbage.
Yeah, it's a problem.
It's hard to say the Russian army is this 10-foot giant when, they're getting smoked in certain areas of Ukraine. But at the same point, the Ukrainians outnumber the Russians like 7-1. So why haven't they conquered the rest of Ukraine yet? Different things like that. So it's interesting seeing how this whole thing has changed. But you're right, a lot of this technology has influenced and affected how we portray some of what's going on in this war. We did make a couple of good calls and predictions in our series. I was saying that the next gen small arms weapon would go to 6 hour. I had that written in there. Boy, was that a gamble on my part. But they did go with the XM5, so now it's going to be the M5. So we're getting rid of the M4. We're going to the M5, which is a 6.8 millimeter projectile. But so they are doing that. I believe some of the soft forces are getting those things, and then it will go from soft to probably like 82nd Airborne and 101st. Some of like the tier 1 rapid deployment type units will get it first. But here's the real kicker part. Here's the challenge. They cannot make a transition to that weapon until you have enough of a munitions stockpile ready. So if you need to use the weapon, you have ammo for the weapon, because we have billions and billions of rounds of 5.56.
Yeah.
Don't have billions and billions of rounds of 6.8. And the infrastructure for that is also going to be quite challenging too, because we've had 5.56 or 223s for 70 years. So you have a lot of factories producing that. You have a lot of civilian places producing that. So when you need ammo, it's relatively easy to produce. This new ammo is not going to be easy to produce, aside from a new caliber and things like that. It's a more advanced round, and it's not just a pure like brass round. I believe it's actually a steel casing and some other components that are not going to be like, you can't just produce this in your garage like you can a 223 or 556. You know, you can get certain components and it's pretty universal and easy to do. Not this ammo. It's very
More sophisticated.
complex.
Yeah.
It's a way better ammo, way better round. You can punch right through body armor, which is great, but not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, you ready for the next question?
Yep.
All right, it comes from James Byrne. Says the series features a fighter squadron from the USSF, scramjet fighters with AI assistance. What particular scenarios influenced this to be depicted as such?
Yeah, so I have one of my mentors from my DoD days. He kind of influenced me a little bit on this particular piece. So the Air Force has been working on its 6th generation fighter for quite some time. It probably will be called Archangels, I believe, unless someone else ends up scrubbing that name. I think it's going to be the FS-36 too. I could be wrong on that, but it's a kind of an interesting concept. So in the past, you draw these things out, AutoCAD, whatever, all these different ways of designing an aircraft, and then it takes like forever. So the F-22 was in development for like 20 some years before it actually flew. You know, same challenge with the F-35. You said you had one plane that wanted to do 3 different missions, and you want to keep it all in the same airframe. Well, that was kind of garbage and delayed up the whole thing because, you know, it's the same airframe, but now you want to hover, and then you want to take off a carrier, and you want to do air superiority. And oh, by the way, you want to be stealth, which means everything has to be internal to it. So it was just very complicated to try and get that done. And it meant that, you know, the development and production things over $1 trillion, and it just took like 20 years. They've changed a lot of that now. We're using 3D modeling and AI-assisted AutoCAD. You're able to design and develop it essentially in a machine and see if it's going to work, you know, fly it in a virtual thing. Actually will work there first, find all the errors and problems, and then make your corrections before you move to a model. They always make these like a mock model that's, you know, kind of scaled down, so to speak. Then you put in the wind tunnels and test the whole thing and go through a series of tests before we actually build a production model. So the 6th generation fighter, man, from design to build, they had this thing actually, I believe they did an actual operational flight of the thing in under 5 years. It's a pretty incredible thing. And big chunks of this actually being built with additive manufacturing or 3D printing, where you're able to manufacture different components and stuff with the machines locally, and then using a lot of other you know, rare earths and exotic materials, you know, a lot of like polymers, titaniums, different types of components that are able to withstand very high rates of speed. So when, you know, scramjet technologies and ramjets, you know, first you got to get up to, there's one engine that gets you from basically from 0 up to about Mach 4, Mach 5. Once you're at Mach 5 speed, there's a switch that's done, and you switch over to a scramjet engine, and from there you're able to, you know, go from Mach 5 up to Mach 10 onwards. This new aircraft is supposed to be one of those kinds of hypersonic aircraft. And so we wanted to talk about it in the series because we're basically in the time frame of 2025, 2026, 2027. You know, this aircraft has already been in the air and flown, I believe it was last year, the year before. And so they're working on some more kinks before they go into serial production. They would have it for this war. And we would also have the B-21 Raider for this war because we already have two B-21 Raiders have already been built. And in a scenario like we drew up in this series, damn right, they're going to have this thing rolling and using this thing. So we wanted to showcase that. And I just think it's kind of neat to look at and how it will be used. It's very different. So it's going to have directed energy weapon on it, lasers for better purposes. And a lot of people think it's an offensive laser. It's not. The people I've talked with about this thing is it's probably going to become a defensive platform where the laser is actually going to be used to target enemy missiles that are or things that could be fired at it. And that removes it as a threat because there's hypersonic missiles are really hard to hit and they're really hard to evade. When a missile is traveling, you know, Mach 3, Mach 4 or 5, really hard to outrun those things. So you got to come up with other defensive mechanisms, and jamming works to an extent, but there's a lot of ways to get around jamming when you use, multispectral targeting pods and cones on the targeting cones. It's very difficult to evade everything. You can't plan for everything. So a laser, however, solves your problem. You zap the missile when it starts to get when it comes inside its targeting envelope, and no more threat. But the bigger part is going to be its actual weapons. So I've been kind of told officially, likely we're going to see this will actually be using, kind of going back to there was an old weapon that the Air Force was working on in the 80s and 90s called the Rods of God. So these will be kind of like Thor's hammers, where they're going to be kinetic kill vehicles, basically. So it's a large rod, more or less, like a tungsten rod or something like that. And in the front, you'll have basically your targeted cone in the front. And these things will be able to use, so you have GPS, but if a GPS is denied, then you go into using either like a visual recognition. So the way a Tomahawk cruise missile works is it has a visual map of the target. And so it just is looking and comparing the terrain, says, yep, I'm traveling the right spot, kind of like found Google, like a Google map, so to speak. So you'll have this thing on the cone where you're not gonna be able to jam it. And on the rear, you're gonna have fins that'll pop out to help guide and stabilize it a little bit, and then a rocket assist. So when you drop something like this from 60 to 80,000 feet in the air, and you're traveling Mach 5 or Mach 10, and you drop this thing, you're already dropping it at a very high rate of speed. Well, now it's going to fall down, and now you have a rocket that's going to really kind of punch it down for a short burn, so you really increase that speed. Well, when you have a 5,000-pound projectile, no warhead, no explosives, but rod, slam into the ground at Mach 10 or Mach 15 or higher, the impact is going to be enormous. So for hitting deep targets is great, but just hitting surface targets, the concussion blast is going to be huge. And there's no real way to defend against something like that. So it's going to be a game changer of a weapon to see how this works. I think it's neat they're doing that, but my personal opinion is I think that we really should be going towards autonomous fighter aircraft, UCAVs, because as cool as this new fighter plane is going to be, and it's quasi space fighter plane, you're still going to have aircraft go in and do the hard missions, the ground support missions, like the A-10, or going and do the enemy, suppression of enemy air defenses, and just, that's where you need F-16s, the Viper models. But that requires a manned mission, and when you have a manned mission, you're going to have your CSAR operations. So pilot goes down, you got to have a team that's ready to go in there and go recover them. So there was one of the groups I kind of follow on YouTube did a really good analysis of how you would attack an S-400 system, a Russian S-400 system. So an F-35, say, goes in to attack it, there's likely going to be, maybe 16 aircraft involved in just taking out one air defense system, because you have to, on the approach to the target, you have to deal with one, you have to suppress enemy aircraft. So you're going to need to jam it and then intercept it. And then as you get closer towards the target, now you have to suppress and jam the air defenses. Again, you need specialized aircraft to go in and jam it, and or the Vipers to go in and suppress it. And then eventually you get in close enough where now the F-35 can drop glide bombs, and they need to get within, I think it's like 25 or 30 miles of the target to then hopefully zip down and nail it. That's a lot of aircraft that you have to have involved in that operation. And then you have to have others on standby to recover the pilots if they get shot down. That whole thing is being thrown out the window when you look at what's happening in Ukraine, where you have the Russians and the Ukrainians using drones to effectively do the same freaking missions without any of that.
Yeah, man.
That's the future. We're being shown the future and how it should be fought, how it should work. The question is, are our policy planners never going to see it and go for it? Because this is the way to go. These things are a hell of a lot cheaper. You don't need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on an aircraft, sorry, Boeing and Lockheed, when we can use these drones. I mean, heck, why not buy 1,000 of these Turkish drones and use those? Who needs all these other expensive whiz-bang aircraft when at the end of the day, these drones are accomplishing what those expensive aircraft would normally do.
Without loss of life and recovery teams.
Yeah, it's looking and saying, how do we get the best bang for our buck? We cannot continue to just spend more and more and more on defense. We're already spending or approaching $800 billion with all the Ukraine stuff. It probably is in excess of $800 billion. So what are we going to do? Spend $1 trillion in defense in 2 years? $1.5 trillion in 10 more? There comes a point where it's like, we need to be more efficient with what we have, and we need to look at cost-effective ways to accomplish the same mission. We don't need to have a 500-ship Navy to counter the Chinese if we can develop smaller autonomous warships that can carry out the same kinds of missions, whether it's electronic, surveillance platforms. The Navy has a catamaran actually that's going to be able to go out and do some of the anti-submarine warfare missions. It's going to have ability to have a towed sonar array on it, even solar powered to parts of its mission, all the different electronic sensors for detecting aircraft and electronic radio traffic, things like that. And it'll carry a handful of those smaller, torpedoes.
Yeah.
Well, if you field a bunch of those, that's a great way to utilize and conduct the anti-submarine warfare operation for a large task force going out or just patrolling the area. And you don't have to have a 200-man warship that needs all the ancillary support to keep that thing operational. It's just getting smart about how we use the resources we have and using them effectively, not breaking the bank, and being able to overwhelm the enemy with very effective drones, autonomous warfare machines like that. Yeah. When we finished Monroe Doctrine Series, we have this really cool series called, I'm not going to give away the name for that one just yet, but we have a really neat series that'll come out in July of 2024. And that one, man, going to be game changer in that one, because there's going to be some cool stuff in that one that people haven't even thought about yet.
Nice.
So it'll be pretty neat.
Exciting, man. Well, looking forward to see the story as it unfolds or finishes, as it were. Or comes to the next arc, if you will.
It's gonna be pretty neat how we do this. So again, with MD6, we've got some really neat evolutions taking place in this particular series, because leading up to this, we've been talking about Jade Dragon had this new weapon called the Terracotta Warriors. And this was their version of kind of like the Cyberdyne, T-9000 Terminators, right?
Yeah.
So we're not far off from that. Elon Musk showed his particular, Optimus. Obviously, it needs work, different things like that. But here's the deal: you got to produce the stuff and start testing and working in order to get the different iterations and get it actually moving, right?
Got to get in the game.
Yeah, and Boston Dynamics has had their little machine. Of course, they used some very clever deep fake technology to show it using weapons, but it really wasn't. But the point is, we're not far away from this kind of stuff. And the way technology evolves and gets faster and better, we're going to see this come to fruition sooner. And it's going to be neat, because Jade Dragon is looking at this and seeing the fallibility of humankind and saying, okay, soldiers get scared. Soldiers need food. They need to take a pee and go, take a dump from time to time, and, bodily functions.
Yeah.
That requires support. It requires keeping them supplied. So how do you eliminate all of that? Well, you create a quad pedal, or bipedal, machine, a drone that can go out there and carry a rifle. And by the way, it's got really good optics. It's pretty damn stable and accurate. It doesn't need to use 50 bullets to hit a single target. It just fires one, maybe two. Game changer. And so we're going to see that evolution start to take place. The soldiers end up nicknaming these things the TKs, the Terracotta Killers, because that's what they're going to basically be. So this one's got a lot of nitty-gritty action in this particular one. We have the flat-out invasion of Taiwan. That's very gritty right there. And then you're going to get a taste of what's going to happen in book 7, where we have the introduction of the terracottas. And that's going to be a game changer of how we handle that. How do we develop? How do we counter that threat? Because right now, we've tipped the scales have tipped in the Allies' favor, right? So Jay Jagan's like, crap, these humans are keep effing up my plan, and the generals are not doing what he wants them to do, supply problems, everything else like that. He's trying to figure out, how do I get the balance back in my control, my way?
Right.
And we're looking and saying, how do we cut the cord to this puppeteer, which is Jay Jagan, and snip it like a marionette and just let the system fall apart? And so we catch our big break in book 6. That's going to lead towards that end state. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how the whole thing unfolds for everyone.
Yeah. When is this released?
Technically, Amazon we have it set for the 7th of November. However, I have been practically killing myself physically and mentally to try and get this book out by the end of this month.
Yes,
So yeah, beta readers have it right now. I've been getting some phenomenal comments back as of yesterday. A couple of them brought up some very good points that in my just 3 hours of sleep a day did not think of. Normally I take 10 weeks to write one of these books. I wrote this one in 5, which is just unheard of for me. It's just been, hell on earth to get it done. So I need to go back into the manuscript though, and there's a few things I got to make a change and adjust and do that. But that's the whole purpose of having beta readers.
Yep. Yeah, they flesh those things out for sure.
I know, and we should have it back from our editor. She's in her 2nd round of edits right now, so I feel bad when we get changes after that back. But we'll have that back. I think it's by Wednesday of next week, Thursday next week, and then we've got basically 5-6 days to make all her changes and the beta reader changes, and then actually upload this thing. And pray to God Amazon doesn't cancel our pre-orders like they did in our German stuff. They canceled all our German pre-orders, which is killing me because I just lost 458 pre-orders, which is $4,100 in sales just went poof.
Nightmare.
Yeah.
You gonna schedule some time to sleep in there?
Yeah,
Maybe look at life.
Oh man, so today I actually slept a lot today. I ended up getting like 7 hours of sleep today, which is more than I got in the previous 2 weeks.
What does that feel like?
I think
writers don't sleep well.
What happens is I wake up and I'm just like so disoriented when I wake up. I'm like, I don't know if like I'm awake, if life is real. It takes like an hour or 2. I sit in the shower for like 30-40 minutes with hot water and chugging a Red Bull and going, oh my God, what's going on? What happened to me? And I wait till the Adderall kicks in, and a half hour, 45 minutes later, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go for the 24 hours and just keep at it. But
my wife has turned into quite an amazing barista at home. So
no, I'm excited. I mean, it's been a lot of work. This was a rough last 5-6 months was rough, but
yeah,
we know what we did wrong and we've made the corrections, and going forward, things are getting stabilized out a little bit better now going forward. We have a little bit of a better system in place, things going on. I mean, this whole self-publishing thing, man, it's just learn as you go. It's challenging, responsible for everything.
Never gets boring. That's one of the best things about it, is it never gets boring. You can always learn something new.
You do. You're learning so much new stuff. I mean, the things I've been learning on the marketing side have just been, game changer, awesome.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunately takes up a lot of time. It's like, okay, well, if I spend 20 or 30 hours becoming a digital marketing master, sure, that's great because I need to sell books. I've also got to write the books. I got to research stuff.
We're a small organization running a very big organization, if you will, for one person. We got our teams around us, but and they're amazing, and our beta readers are phenomenal. I love my beta readers so much. they're amazing. They take all the worry out of things before you release the book. We get our spines tighten up a bit before they go. But yeah, well, you're doing great, man. And people love the series. They're invested in the series, so it's gonna be fun to see where it goes. Yeah,
and we have so we got the 20 books to 50K conference is coming up here in the near future. It's next month, and so Miranda and I will be speaking at. We're doing three of the breakout sessions. We'll be talking on that one. So anyone can go to that. You don't have to be a writer. It's open to the public. It's in Vegas. So the sessions we're talking on is one of them is called Writing Therapy. How to turn your therapy into a business that's been able to support yourself, because that's a big one for me, what we did, because that's how I got into writing. And then the other one we're talking on is called husband-wife writing duos. How do you make it work while avoiding divorce court? I know I have been doing that for 7 years and it's been challenging.
That is challenging. I worked with my wife for 10 years, and yeah, I needed 10 years to be together with her before I could work 10 years with her. And we've had 10 years doing this since. So
Yeah, it's
yeah, it's
challenging, but
challenging.
it's quite fun, to
Yeah,
do because I've seen an author community where you have husbands retire their wives and wives retire their husbands and they go to work in
that's
the
what I did.
business.
That's what I did. Retired my
Yeah.
wife 2 years ago.
And that's the way to do it, and then the third final session we'll be talking on is how to carry your audience from one book or series to the next, which is, as an author, absolutely pivotal because
Critical.
if we can't do that, then we're not going to be doing this very long. And readers don't always realize that you're either doing this together or you're doing it on your own and just choose some other company.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here's a little munchkin. She's now back home from going to the party. Was that fun? Oh, a little boiling water. She's 3.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll let you get to the daddy daycare.
I know, right? So I got to get back to doing this and then do the next Q&A for the sci-fi series because I'm like falling way behind on getting these things done. So I'm trying.
All right,
So,
we'll look forward to it.
all right, readers. I look forward to Monroe Doctrine Volume 6 is coming out very, very soon. So we'll talk to y'all later.
All right.
Bye.